I found out that, and I always wondered why my father never really accepted me, but I ruined his life. He got my mother pregnant, and so I ruined his life. I suffered for that forever. And every day I heard that I was stupid, dumb, fat, ugly. I had shit for brains and I would never amount to anything. And even when he left our home, I had still heard those things so much that they still replayed in my head. I'd learned to turn the volume down, but sometimes those messages still come back, especially if it's, a rough day and I make a mistake. I'm such an idiot. And so I still struggle with those messages.
Hello, and welcome to the Stay Free Forever Podcast, episode 16. My name is Clifford Fuel, host of the podcast that aims to help you adapt and thrive. Every day in the United States, about 1,500 prisoners are released from state and federal prisons. Every day. 1,500. That's 30 per day per state. Studies show that 2/3 of them will be rearrested within 3 years. Why? Well, with no job, no money, and no place to live, most find themselves facing the same pressures and temptations that landed them in prison in the first place. My guest today is a 48-year-old woman who has founded a nonprofit agency in Casper, Wyoming, that is dedicated to serving the unique needs of the formerly incarcerated, helping ex-prisoners to find and keep jobs, to secure at least transitional housing to keep them off the streets, and to get the mentoring they need to stay positive in a very negative situation, is what she is all about. Dr. Crystal D. Nelson is a counselor, and last year earned her PhD in Human and Social Services. It was in the shared Casper workspace that she now uses as an incubator for her nonprofit, Rising Phoenix Therapeutic Community and Rescue Center, that Crystal wrote her dissertation about the experiences of caregivers and inmates during treatment. Crystal was born in 1976 in Woodward, Oklahoma. Her parents met at work, basically. Mom managed a Pizza Hut, and Dad drove a Pepsi truck. She is the oldest of 5 and, as a child, loved school and singing. She says she had a life-ruining move in 3rd grade when she went from a small country school to a town school that was 3 times as big. Crystal said she always wanted to be a teacher, but figured her penmanship was too poor to write on a whiteboard every day. Asked who she looked up to as a kid, Crystal points to her elementary school counselor, Miss Nancy Oots Hegeman, who helped Crystal to work through some serious challenges that included severe verbal abuse from a parent. I didn't set out to be a counselor, but it's no surprise that I ended up being one, she says. To learn about her journey to help others on their journeys, it is my privilege to welcome to the Stay Free Forever podcast, Crystal Nelson.
Hi, Cliff. Thank you for the opportunity to be here today.
You're welcome. Thank you for taking the opportunity. I'm really interested to hear what you have to say about some really important stuff.
It really is important stuff.
And it's also important for, I think, us to know, since you enjoyed singing so much, what were you singing?
I used to pretend I was Barbara Streisand, and we lived out in the country when I was really little. And the front porch was my stage, and I'd have my jump rope, and that was my microphone, and I would perform on the stage. And I wrote a song, and then my mother and my sister made fun of me for my song, and so I quit. I gave up.
Aw.
Funny now that my sister said that she actually taught my song to her daughter so it won't get lost.
Oh, that's nice. That's nice. What was the title of that song?
I don't know if it had a title, but my dad drove trucks, and so it was about being a truck driver on the road. Part of the chorus was driving over grasshoppers, snakes, and toads, and that's really all I can remember.
Okay, excellent. I'd be doing us a disservice if I didn't ask you to favor us with a couple of bars of People Who Need People.
I don't know a lot of songs. I listen to Christian radio, and so I know most of those songs, but I haven't sang in front of people since junior high.
My experience in our brief time knowing each other is that you're an excellent speaker as well. The thing that impressed me most about you was that you handed me a trifold brochure for an organization that basically still exists in your head, but the trifold brochure is fully formed, and it's like you're creating this out of just the desire to create something. Talk about that a little bit.
I started working at the Casper Reentry Center's therapeutic community and listening to the stories of the men in that facility. Their frustrations, several of them had been at that facility 2, 3, 4 times. There's also another program that is Department of Corrections, and they would bounce back and forth, and they would get out and they would be dedicated to their sobriety, staying sober. But then they'd get released from their incarceration, their substance abuse treatment, back into the community. As people with a record, it was hard to get a good job that helped them pay bills. Usually when they get out of incarceration, they're already behind in child support. They still owe restitution. And they get out and then they can't get a job to help pay the bills of daily living. They have a hard time finding a place to live. And so, unfortunately, with all of the struggles they face, they end up going back to what they know they can make money at, which is selling drugs. And it's hard to sell drugs and not go back to using. Having heard that same story from several individuals, I realized that, yes, they have a problem because of their substance use, but society has a problem too, because we keep them in this perpetual negative cycle that it's very, very hard for them to get out of. I started thinking about, okay, something else needs to be done because what we're doing isn't working. And it was New Year's Eve that year. God basically tapped me on the shoulder and said, PhD, it's time. And I had had a friend who had been trying to get me to get a PhD for 5 years. She said I would be an excellent college professor, but you have to have a PhD to do that. I was like, I already have a master's and I'm overqualified for half the stuff I want to do. So why get a PhD? But when God said PhD, I knew better than to argue with him. So I set off on the PhD program. I thought, okay, if I'm going to learn everything I need to know about helping this population, I at least want the paper to prove that I know what I'm talking about when I speak. One of my courses was a grant writing class, and we had to come up with a nonprofit idea. And I had been running small group. The group I was in charge of was the Phoenix. So my nonprofit idea was the after incarceration step down substance abuse program. And my teacher's like, no, you have to give it a name. Okay, fine. Rising Phoenix. And so it was born out of that PhD journey. And I've been on paper since 2021. It's been developed. It's just a matter of getting it launched. And there's intensive outpatient treatment or IOP providers in Casper, but nobody else focuses on the specific needs of the formerly incarcerated. And so that is my niche. If you don't have a record, you can go somewhere else. I only focus on the formerly incarcerated.
I'm curious about the moment God tapped you on the shoulder.
It was a knowing in my soul that this is what I was supposed to do. I think it was probably a middle of the night. This is what God says I'm doing, and I know better than to not obey what God says. So I had messaged my friend and told her we needed to have a phone call, and sitting in a booth at Outback Steakhouse when we were on the phone, I still remember which booth. I told her, I'm like, well, God said PhD, and she let out this maniacal blah ha ha laugh that is only hers. And she was like, I told you. I was like, I know, but I can cuss you out. I know better than cussing God out. And she just laughed at me again. So
So you went to bed one night full of doubt and you woke up the next morning full of certainty.
it was like, this is what I have to do. It's what is in store for me.
I'm always curious about the moment of clarity.
Yeah, there had just been enough unsettling in my soul with hearing these guys' stories and knowing how frustrated they were, and then their families too. They finally get out, oh, I have my husband back for however long, and then, oh, nope, he's not back. He's going in again. So I knew something different needed to be done.
And you're sort of beginning with the end in mind. Your brochure lays out not only a place for the formerly incarcerated to get the assistance you mentioned, but also a method by which they get out of their own heads and care for an indeed less fortunate population than themselves. Talk about that a little bit.
I love watching pit bulls and parolees on Animal Planet. The lady who ran it, Tia Maria Torres, they started in California. and her husband was incarcerated. And she had run this rescue, and then they ended up getting picked up by Animal Planet and ended up moving to New Orleans after Hurricane Katrina. They had gone to help during Katrina anyway, and then decided, you know what, that's the city of second chances. We're gonna go there. And in the South, there's a much bigger problem with bully breed dogs, people not spaying, neutering their pets, just animals left to run free all over. And so I loved watching that show anyway, and thought, you know what? Some of the places here in Wyoming, the incarcerated facility, I believe it's Torrington, the Wyoming Medium Correctional Institute, they partner with the place in Cheyenne and they actually do the dog training there. And so there's already a partnership. And so knowing that some of the guys who could come to Rising Phoenix already have that background and experience, I'm like, why not incorporate that in to the nonprofit too? Give the guys something to look forward to working with the animals. It helps the animals in our community. The four-legged children I have in my home right now, I've got all four of them from the Humane Society. So I'm very familiar with them. I know Craig, their director, really well. And I told him, I'm not trying to, compete with what you guys are doing. And he was like, absolutely not. He was like, our dogs are incarcerated as much as your men are. They live in their pen here and they don't know what it's like to be in a home and with a family. And so getting some of the bully breed dogs, helping rehabilitate them, get them ready to live in a home and be a beloved family pet.
The facility that would house classrooms and perhaps a kennel has yet to be built, or maybe it's been built, but you haven't found it yet. What stage are you at now? And do you ever get discouraged?
I have been discouraged for the past 3 years for sure, because I'm ready to launch this thing, but God hasn't opened the doors for it yet and said, okay, it's time, let's move. It's all laid out on paper and in my head, as you mentioned earlier. It's a matter of getting people to apply to be participants, approving them to be a participant. Just because someone applies doesn't mean I'm going to automatically accept them. They've got to be focused on their sobriety and wanting to do something different. A lot of times in the incarcerated treatment programs, they're doing their time because that's where they said they had to go. I had one former client on the inside. They said, we want you to go to treatment. And he said, absolutely not. I don't want treatment. He took more time on his sentence because he didn't want to go to treatment. And then they threw him on the bus and sent him to treatment anyway. I want to make sure that the people who are in the program really do want to do better, be better. Once we get participants and I get the treatment groups actually going and moving forward, that will build momentum too, because some people have heard our name. I've got a social media account and we've been doing some community fundraisers, but we're not a very well-known name yet. Rising Phoenix, people have seen the logo, they've heard of it, perhaps, but it's getting that recognition in that name where they know, oh yeah, I know what that organization is.
Men and women?
That is the hope. I don't necessarily want men and women in the same treatment group because I want them focused on their program and not the opposite sex. Once we get applicants, whichever gender it is going to determine what gender we start as while we're growing, building, and then can expand.
What does your typical applicant ideally look like? And what do you need first?
Someone who learned from the errors of their past, does not want to make the same mistakes again, truly is focused on becoming a better person for themselves. A lot of times when they're in the substance abuse treatment programs, oh, I'm doing this for my daughter. I'm doing this for my mom. Well, your daughter wasn't enough for you to stay sober before. What makes you think they're going to be enough to keep you sober now? It may start with an external person as who they're doing this for, but they have to internalize it. It has to become about themselves. I want this because I want to be better. I want to be a better father, a better husband, a better wife, a better mother. They have to internalize it at some point where it's important to them and they see it as, I don't have any other options and I don't want to go back to incarceration. I need all the help I can get, and who is open and willing to learn new things, be vulnerable, and be curious. especially when we've grown up with a lot of trauma and chaos in our pasts. We can be very close-minded and, dare I say, stubborn and maybe a little bit belligerent. Like, nope, this is me. This is how I am. You don't like it? Walk. How far has that gotten you in the past? How well has that served you? Usually not much if we've got a background of incarceration. For anyone listening who wants to get involved and who maybe has means to help propel us forward, we can always use funding. I did have someone give us a private grant last year for $25,000, so that gave us some startup funds. I do have some office space that I use. When we get going, I will end up needing to get a private office so I can keep a file cabinet and all their chart stuff there. I have the files to build, I just need the paperwork to put in them. And it's getting the word out. I was actually scheduled to present at one of the Department of Correction treatment facilities last week, and I drove all the way there, and my service dog in training was in my car, and I was not allowed to stay. I had to turn around and drive all the way back home. And so that visit will be rescheduled so that I can go present to the population that's doing substance abuse treatment while incarcerated so that they know there is an opportunity here in Casper. Oddly enough, I went to the office on Saturday to make some copies, and I had a letter from a woman from Casper who was incarcerated and said, "Hey, I heard you have this there and I'm interested." People are hearing. It may take a while, but I'm getting closer to that point where God's going to open the door and say, "Okay, it's time."
Have you always been a woman of such strong faith?
No, I grew up in church, but I've had periods in my life where I got very upset with God and walked away. After a while, it's like, oh, wait a minute. I am like 20 miles off of the road. Let me get back where I need to be.
You could have gone south in your life based on the fact that you were not treated well as a young girl.
It is honestly a miracle that I am on the path I am. And there are times I sit back and I reflect, like my life could have gone so differently. When my parents got together, they thought they were in love. They were young, 21, 22 years old. They got pregnant with me. My mom's best friend told my dad, "You got her pregnant. What are you going to do about it?" And so my dad thought he'd do the honorable thing and they'd get married. My father was Prince Charming when they were dating, but once they got married, the real person came out and he was not a very nice person. I was 3 months in the womb when they got married. The last 6 months of my development were in a stress bath of cortisol and adrenaline. I didn't know anything about adverse childhood experiences until I worked at the treatment program. I knew that there were things that happened in my life that shouldn't have, but I didn't know what they were or what to do about them. And when I was at the treatment facility, it was probably February of 2019. One of my coworkers came in and handed me a stack of paperwork that was about 3.5 inches thick and said, "Here, you start teaching this on Monday." It was Thursday at 3:45 and we left at 4. And I'm like, "What is this?" ACEs. What are ACEs? Adverse childhood experiences. So I had from Thursday night till Monday morning to figure it out. I'm like, "Where's the curriculum?" "Oh, you write your own." And I thought, okay, this is great. I don't even know what it is. So I spent the weekend going over all the information that I had acquired. And a few months prior to that, I had seen a clip on social media, and it was the TED Talk that Dr. Nadine Burke Harris had given on adverse childhood experiences. And as I started to piece that together, I took the adverse childhood experiences questionnaire, and a high score is not a good thing. The high score is a 10, and my score is 7. And I thought, oh, crap, this is my life. And then it all started to make sense. I finally had a lens with which to filter everything I had experienced in childhood and the things I knew weren't right. But you can't go back. At one point, my mother had told me, if I could go back and have you over again and do it differently, I would. I found out that, and I always wondered why my father never really accepted me, but I ruined his life. He got my mother pregnant, and so I ruined his life. I suffered for that forever. And he was in our home. My parents were married till I was 16. And every day I heard that I was stupid, dumb, fat, ugly. I had shit for brains and I would never amount to anything. And even when he left our home, I had still heard those things so much that they still replayed in my head. And I'd learned to turn the volume down, but sometimes those messages still come back, especially if it's, a rough day and I make a mistake. I'm such an idiot. And so I still struggle with those messages. When I look back now, I loved Mr. Rogers. I was doing something one day and I realized Mr. Rogers very much was a person-centered therapist. He operated like Carl Rogers' therapy process, that person-centered, walking with them through that. And I honestly think that growing up watching Mr. Rogers is part of what helped me do as well as I've done. Also, that counselor. When we moved in third grade, I did not make friends at the new school. And fourth grade, I went to her office every week or every quarter. So 4 times that year, I went and got to hang out with her. By fifth grade, she knew there was something going on. She'd had some conversations with my mom and knew what home life was like. So I got to skip recess once a week to go hang out with Miss Oots. I looked forward to that every week. There was someone who believed in me and had that positive interaction. Those are the things that helped me move forward in a positive way and not sink into the other things that I could have. I was actually suicidal starting in junior high. And we had a speaker come to our school. I forget what his name was, but I wrote into their suicide crisis center. And it was a weekend. I got a phone call from me and I answered the phone and it was this guy. And I thought, oh my gosh, someone actually knows I exist. So it was little moments like that that kind of helped keep me going. My father very much was a perfectionist. If we got a B, that was failing. And so we had to have good grades. And I was very good in school, kind of a brown noser actually, because I got positive attention for doing well in school. Those are some of the things that helped keep me going. Moving forward, trying to do the best I could, trying to please my father, really. And I remember my mom telling me, you're going to kill yourself trying. He's never going to be happy. So you might as well give up. But that perfectionist drive was already instilled in me. And so I'm not a quitter. I'm going to keep going.
What were some of the things that Miss Oots said to you that kept you going?
I honestly don't even remember. But I remember it was a self-esteem class because there were other people kind of in my same boat. I know at one point we got to create a folder, like she gave us manila folders and we got to color them and design them how we wanted. But that's really all I remember. It's nothing specific, but just that someone noticing me and giving me positive attention.
It reminds me of the sign a coworker of mine had on his desk that said, "They won't remember what you said. They won't remember what you did. They will remember how you made them feel."
Absolutely. Yeah. When we feel that we matter, we're willing to do more than we would have otherwise. They've shown that in workplace studies. When people feel appreciated, they will absolutely go above and beyond. But if they're just a number, just a cog in the wheel, nope, you're going to get minimal effort from me because there's no reason for me to be dedicated to you because you don't care about me.
What haven't we spoken about so far that you think is pretty important about what you're doing and what you want to do?
Let's touch on adverse childhood experiences statistics, especially since they're so much higher with the incarcerated population. And especially with your work, having been corrections before, you've seen kind of yes, they're criminals when you're working with them, but they've also got a lot of trauma too. Underneath that criminal jumpsuit, there's still a person who's been wounded.
Yeah.
One of the things that I learned in writing my own adverse childhood experiences curriculum and doing the work that I do, I partially because of my own background, I do a lot of work with trauma people because I've been there, done that. Got the t-shirt, wore it out, bought another one. And I learned by teaching that adverse childhood experiences class how prevalent adverse childhood experiences really are, especially when we look at the incarcerated population. They have much higher rates of adverse childhood experiences than the average person living in town.
What's a typical ACE?
The ACEs can include things such as physical abuse, neglect, emotional neglect. Was anyone in the home incarcerated? Anyone in the home have a mental health issue? Was there domestic violence in the home? Going back to just normal statistics, 64% of the population have at least one adverse childhood experience. Incarcerated population, 98% have at least one. 78% have four or more. The people who are incarcerated tend to have higher ACE scores. Not a guarantee, not always, but the trend is they definitely have higher adverse childhood experiences. And, when I reflect back on my own life, my life could have gone so much differently. I grew up in church, so if the doors were open, we were there. If I did something wrong, God was going to turn me into a pillar of salt. And I lived in fear of my earthly father, but then, God's going to strike me dead with lightning, so don't do anything wrong. People have the Scared Straight programs. Well, I had my own Scared Straight program as a child, and that was kind of it. I had two parents in the home. If you did anything that my father didn't like, you got beat for it. And so it was, what can I do to not be in trouble? So trying to do everything perfectly to not be in trouble. But even then, I was on a Bible quiz team. This is fifth grade. And there was a top quizzer every month. And I was top quizzer every month. And my dad's like, well, everyone else must be pretty stupid if you got first place. It was around that time that my mom told me, if you're trying to win your dad's approval, you're going to kill yourself trying. So you might as well just stop. But that drive of, I need to do enough so that I can be enough. And fast forward into therapy, I had that realization one day. I'm not a human being. I'm a human doing. Because all my life had been, if I can do enough, maybe I'll be okay. And I didn't know what it was like to just be a human being and that I breathe and that's okay. And so that was a pivotal shift for me as an adult of, oh, I can be a human and that's enough.
Wow. Is your dad still living?
As far as I know, yes.
When's the last time you talked to him?
I think I called him for his birthday, maybe in 2007.
Would you have anything to say to him?
No. I've struggled with that a lot. My sister was the only child who would still try to communicate with him. She'd been calling him and he wouldn't answer the phone. They drove by and she knocked on the door and he answered. And she was like, I've been trying to call you. And he said, I know. I figured if I ignored the phone, you'd leave me alone. That's his bed. He's going to have to lie in it. It hurts because, like, man, that's my dad. But I've tried reaching out and building that bridge with him in the past, and he just never reciprocates. He doesn't have it. It is what it is.
It's all voluntary. Learning when to cut your losses in order to protect yourself and what you have going on.
And that is so hard to do. And when I taught the adverse childhood experiences class, I told people, by and large, parents do the best they can with what they know. If they don't know any different or any better, they aren't going to parent any different or any better. There's a book by author Louise Hay, and there was a forgiveness exercise in there. You picture yourself as a little child of 5 or 6, and you work with your own little child, and then you picture your mother as a little girl of 4 or 5, and then you picture your father as a little boy of 3 or 4. And it was when I did that exercise that I realized I don't think my father knew any different. I don't think he knew any better. And when we have children, we tend to parent our children how we were parented because that's what we know about parenting. So we pass down these patterns, healthy or not, it's what we know. And unless we take the time to learn something different, learn something better, we're going to recreate that. And through that exercise, I realized I don't think my dad knew any better. When I was born, he would not let my mother pick me up or hold me. And so that connection that's supposed to form between a mother and her child could not form with me. My dad didn't want a spoiled, rotten child, so would not let my mom pick me up or hold me. And when she was pregnant with my sister, she realized, wait, I should be able to pick up my child. That should be a normal thing. So I guess she tried to pick me up at that point. And she said I stiffened like a board. In my mind, I'm probably thinking, put me down, woman, this is weird, because I wasn't used to being held at that point. And so she realized at that point it was too late for me. The best way she could protect me was kick me out of the nest so that I could fly.
Well, Crystal, as you know, there are three parts to the Stay Free Forever podcast.
Yes.
And part two has me share some coursework done by another person and get your thoughts on it. The anger management course, it's from a woman in Wyoming who's in her 30s. Which of the 6 emotional hierarchy of needs do you need to work on the most? What is your plan to fulfill those needs in a positive way? She wrote, I need to work on knowing that I am loved. I am anxiously attached, so tend to want to people please and cater to people that don't treat me well. I need to remind myself of my value and understand that I do not need people in my life that don't treat me well.
That anxious attachment. I've realized how important attachment theory is. It's so easy for those of us who've grown up with trauma to not have secure attachment because we didn't have a secure base to learn from. Anxious attachment absolutely drives us to be people pleasers. Going back to the human doing versus human being. If I do enough, maybe I'll be enough. Maybe I can earn their love. If I make them happy, then they'll love me back. Part of the work I do as a therapist, I have some sets of positive affirmations that I will send to clients. It's being consistent with the positive affirmations, but the other challenge is reading them out loud to yourself in front of a mirror. It's not just reading them and, oh, yeah, whatever, but it's speaking them to our inner wounded child, the little self that got wounded years ago in childhood and is still stuck in that wounded state. For me, it's my 8-year-old self because I was 8 when we moved schools and didn't make friends. So I always speak to my little 8-year-old self. She is okay. Yeah, she might not have made friends at the new school, but she is still loved. And as we start to give that attention to our inner wounded self, our inner wounded child starts to feel more confident and comfortable. Oh, someone does love me. It might not be my parent, but there's this cool person. There's Big Chrissy who likes me and says I'm important. And so our inner wounded child starts to feel more confident. And then we, as an adult, start to feel more confident too, as we do that work with that inner wounded child. From the Christian perspective, we can say, yes, I need to know I'm loved. We know cognitively that God loves us. But especially when we've been through trauma and our earthly parents failed us, it is so hard to feel that love. I know a lot of stuff in my head, but I don't feel anything from the shoulders down. Here's the things that God says about us. And how can we learn to connect our head and our heart so that we not only know it cognitively, but can feel it personally too? I do know that I am loved, and I can feel that I am loved too.
You're a 48-year-old professional woman and you're still doing self-affirmations in front of a mirror?
Every morning. When I put my glasses on, that's my clue to read them. And then I reread the same ones at night before I go to bed. I've got a set that has 6 on a page. And so I read it in the morning, I reread it at night, I flip the page, so the next morning I'm ready to start again. I was in my kitchen one day, and I don't remember what I did, but I was between the refrigerator and the stove. Something happened, and I am such an idiot. My brain stood up, and my brain said, no, you're not an idiot. You just didn't use your smart brain in that moment. I turned around in my house because it was that audible of a voice. I had to make sure there was no one else standing in my house. And I thought, alrighty then, my brain is now standing up for me. And so we can reprogram the brain. That's the amazing thing about neuroscience is we can rewire our brains. We can turn our negative mindset into a more positive mindset with positive affirmations, practicing gratitudes. It's what we feed it. And when we've been fed garbage and negativity in our early childhood, garbage in, garbage out. And so we have to change what we're feeding ourselves to get the more positive outcome. So, yep, if I didn't do positive affirmations now as an adult, who knows where I'd be even now. I've done a lot of work, but those are what helped me stay on the positive trajectory.
The third part of the Stay Free Forever podcast has us each share a quote or a passage or a lyric or something that inspires us or we feel is compelling, and we share it and talk about it. Who would you like to go first?
I would love to go first. I'd listened to one of your previous podcasts and knew that this came up, and I was looking through the curriculum that you offer. One of the things stood out to me, and I dug out my notebook. I'm writing this down because that's going to be my quote when it's my turn. If you always do what you've always done, you'll always get what you've always got. And that is such a perfect quote, especially for the formerly incarcerated population. Everything you've done got you here, got you behind bars. And so if you continue to do and follow that same path, you're going to end up back again. If you want to get out and stay out, you want to become a pro-social, productive member of society, you're going to have to learn to do something different. And that really is what Rising Phoenix is about, giving them that opportunity to choose to do something different and supporting them in that endeavor so that they aren't just trying to figure it out on their own and hopefully it sticks and they can make it, but they've got the support to move forward in that new way, because it's hard to make new patterns. I talk about ruts all the time. It's easy to get sucked into the old ruts. If you want to make new ruts, you've got to fight the steering wheel to keep the car from getting sucked into the old. And that's what we have to do in our minds with the positive affirmations, with the new thinking, the stuff they learn in their substance abuse treatment. Put that into practice. Fight it with your life. Eventually, the new ruts will become the old ruts. And then we may want to shift again to become even better. And so it's a never-ending process, really. But we can make a change for the better. But you've got to be willing to do different things than you've done before.
Knowing that you had some Bible expertise, I went looking for some of my favorites, and of course I drifted toward the Psalms. From Psalm 51, give me back the joy of your salvation, and a willing spirit sustain in me. I will teach transgressors your ways, and sinners shall return to you.
Just that whole concept of being kind to other people, renew that steadfast spirit in me, cleanse me of my sins. We also have to have that turning away, which goes right into Rising Phoenix too. Okay, I may have done these dumb things in my past, but I want to be different moving forward, and giving them the support and the help they need to do that and not have to be alone in that journey.
The Stay Free Forever podcast is recorded and produced by Clifford Fuel, owner of Stay Free Forever, LLC, a Colorado and Wyoming company. Stay Free Forever provides adult and youth life skills courses via both e-learning and mailed workbooks, plus Zoom classes for any age group. Our theme music was composed and performed by James Benjamin Fuel. Editing and technical assistance are provided by Mary Tulin. My name is Molly Moore. For more information, go to stayfreeforever.com or email clifford@stayfreeforever.com.